This is the second of our videos looking at the supernatural in A Christmas Carol. The first video focused on assessment objective 1, which is gathering ideas. This video will be looking at the evidence that goes with them, but not just the evidence, what we're going to say about the writer's craft that will get us the assessment objective 2 marks. This is just a quick reminder of the 3 assessment objectives. For most of the questions on the literature paper, the mark is out of 30. The marks are divided between all 3 assessment objectives, with the weighting doubled in assessment objective 1 and assessment objective 2. So they are worth a maximum of 12 each out of 30. And assessment objective 3, which is context, is worth 6 marks. So in the first video we looked at the kind of things we might say about the supernatural and the different spirits that visit Scrooge in the novella. We also touched a little bit on the evidence that we might use, but this video is all about looking at the evidence in a smart way, so that you're not going to be burdened with having to revise too many quotations in preparation for the exam. And we'll also be looking at assessment objective 2 in a little bit more detail in terms of the things you would say about the pieces of evidence that you have chosen, because they will be the things that will get you onto the higher levels for assessment objective 2. So not just what techniques are used by the writers, but how those techniques are used and how they generate meaning. Okay, this is a quick reminder of the big ideas that we discussed in the first video. So the big ideas are the overarching ideas that I think you can use pretty much in any answer to any question really in A Christmas Carol, but most especially the role of the supernatural. The emphasis is slightly different. If it's a different question, if you got a question, for example, on Scrooge's character, you would still cover these same big ideas, but obviously the focus wouldn't be on the supernatural. It would be on other elements of the novella. And pretty much any question you get, ideas very similar to these will be relevant to your answer. But there we have a summary of each of the ghosts and the role they play in affecting Scrooge and impacting him in the novella. So some of the evidence we'll be looking at obviously will link to the points that you can see on the screen. So you might want to refresh your memory there of those key points and check your notes. Okay, first of all, Marley's ghost. We're going to be looking at all 4 spirits in this video, so what I would like you to do each time a new spirit is introduced, and we've got a slide like this with the image of the spirit and lots of lines coming off it, is to try and brainstorm the ideas that you can remember in terms of language features and techniques or quotations, anything at all, any incidents, or can you remember a fragment of information that you could put into an answer. Pause the video and give yourself 3 minutes and see what you can come up with and see how it compares with what I've got on the next slide. Okay, so these are the quotations I identified for Marley's ghost. They are in no way exhaustive. They give a summary of some of the key ideas that his visit impacts on Scrooge. If you think about the things we said right at the very beginning, the Marley's ghost is about shocking Scrooge and showing him the error of his ways. So you know, he wants to show Scrooge what will happen to him if he doesn't change. He's also about reinforcing Christian values. So if you look at the quotations in front of you on the slide, you don't need all of them. If you can choose quotations that you think sum up both those aspects in terms of the impact on Scrooge, and perhaps learn 2 or 3 of them, that would be enough for you to pick up some developed ideas that you can link to the techniques that the writer has chosen. So what I would like you to do now is to decide on 2 or 3 of these quotations and see what you can come up with for them. What techniques can you spot? What would you say in an exam situation about the methods that the writer uses? Are there any particular methods used? Are there any particular kinds of words that are used that you can zoom in on and dig into and show layers of understanding? So just give yourself 5 minutes, pause the video, select some of the most important quotations from the ones on the screen and see what you come up with. You want a little bit of a clue. I think I've gone for the quotations about the chains. I wear the chains I forged in life, and I made it link by link. I also like the quotation on the left about the charity, mercy, forbearance and benevolence, because those are values to do with Christianity. That's just a little bit of a clue. Let's see what you can come up with. Pause the video. You've got 5 minutes. Okay, so the first language examples I zoomed in on, as I suggested on the previous slide, is the extended metaphor. Did you spot it was a metaphor? So we got this idea of chains representing sin. So when he says, I wear the chains I forged in life, what he's literally talking about, the chains representing the sin that he drags around with him, and each one of them represents something he has done in life. If you remember, there was another quotation about all the various objects that were hanging from the chains, and they had a lot to do with money. And Scrooge is very much like Marley. He's lived a very, very similar life. And when Marley shows him the chains he's dragging around, he's a reminder of the chains he himself already has made through the sin that he has been involved in, the greed and the avarice and desire for money. And linked to that is the other quotation, I made it link by link and yard by yard, so literally each part of the chain represents a sin. And it represents the sin of greed. It's one of the 7 deadly sins in the Bible, so you could throw in some contextual understanding there. It's also known as avarice. That's the old-fashioned word for greed. He wants to shock Scrooge, so I've also identified, you have laboured on it since it is a ponderous chain. So this is Marley really kind of hitting home to Scrooge about the level of his sin and how much more sin he's committed in the 7 years since Marley's death, because they led very similar lives, but he's had 7 more years of it, and that's why it's ponderous. It's something that's heavy and very difficult to move. I also focused in on the Christian message, because again we can link that into contextual ideas, but those 4 nouns there, charity, mercy, forbearance and benevolence, are all Christian virtues. So charity is the act of giving to help other people. Mercy is where you look upon someone favourably, and you don't necessarily condemn them for what they've done. So you show Christian mercy if you not let someone off, but you don't necessarily punish them as harshly as they need to be. It's a little bit of irony there that Scrooge has been asked to show mercy when clearly Marley's dragging these chains that represent all of his sin. Benevolence is kindness as well, so benevolence is very close to charity as well, and forbearance is about putting up with difficult situation. So they're all values that are admirable for a Christian person. So if you were to discuss these and their impact on Scrooge in a question, these are the kind of language ideas that you could pick up on, but you would need to take each word and dig much, much deeper to show an understanding of what individual words mean. So we're on to the Ghost of Christmas Past now. Same thing as before. Pause the video. What can you remember? Can you remember any details at all? Anything stick in your head? Okay, so these are some of the quotations you might have isolated for the Ghost of Christmas Past. So we want to think about the impact that the Ghost of Christmas Past has on Scrooge. A lot of the things on the screen there focus on his appearance and also, I suppose, the aspects of how his personality comes across. There are other things in this stave which have an impact on Scrooge that are not necessarily to do with those things, because so obviously, depending on the question, you can bring those ideas in as well. You don't just have to focus on the description of the spirit itself. But for the purposes of this video, we're just focusing on what the spirits look like and what they do. And I think the biggest impact that the spirit has on Scrooge is shining a light on the things he's forgotten about, which gives you a clue as to some of the quotations I might have identified here. But he also represents the things from Scrooge's past, and he represents Christianity as well. So same as before, pause the video, give yourself 5 minutes, see what you can come up with. Okay, no surprise there. I think I've picked up on the imagery that mentions light because it's a huge link with Christianity. So we've got the description: from its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, and we've also got a great extinguisher for a cap. So the light that emanates from this spirit is so bright, there's a cap to try and keep it under control. And in fact, it's a theme of this particular stave that Scrooge can't bear the light, which in itself, the light represents knowledge and understanding and Christianity, and Scrooge can't bear it. It suggests, it implies that Scrooge is in darkness, and in fact a lot of the description of Scrooge is about darkness. So you can link, anytime there is reference to light and Scrooge's reaction to it, you can link that to the place that Scrooge is in. The other thing we can talk about if we discuss the theme of light is that it's a direct reference, it's a direct allusion to John's Gospel, where Jesus identifies himself as the light of the world. So the impact on Scrooge is also relevant there in the third example: your lip is trembling. What is that upon your cheek? This is the impact of this spirit on Scrooge. And obviously the reference to trembling there, it's emotive language, an emotive verb. And what is that upon your cheek? The rhetorical question referring to the emotional response that Scrooge has to seeing these things from his past. The second example I picked was the description of the strength of the spirit. We've got a semantic field of words suggesting power and strength, and there are 3 words you can zoom in on in that particular quotation that reinforce this idea of it being a really powerful being. So relentless meaning won't stop. If somebody's relentless, you can't do anything to stop them, they just keep going. Pinioned is literally having your arms or your legs held in place. So the spirit is so powerful, Scrooge is unable to move, and he's forced to observe. He's reluctant to see these things from his past. So all those words suggest the power and strength of the past and the impact it can have on someone. Okay, same again. Pause the video for a few minutes, see what you can come up with. What can you remember about the Ghost of Christmas Present? If you can remember particular quotations, write those down too, and see if you pick up on anything that's on the next slide. Okay, so number of quotations here. I think some of them are particularly relevant because a couple of them are quotations I think are relevant to virtually any question you might be asked. But I'm just interested to see what you might home in on. There are a couple that pick up the light imagery, so I think that might be a sensible image to zoom in on. There's one in particular I think that you surely have to include in your revision, and that's the reference to the boy is ignorance, the girl is want, because that is something that impacts on virtually anything you are asked about in the novella. So decide on 3 quotations from the ones on the screen there, and let's see what you can come up with for them. You've got 5 minutes, so if you pause the video, Let's see what you can come up with. Okay, so you might have come up in your three, you might have come up with some of these. I certainly hope so. In the first selection there, the top few, I went for the obvious ones that were to do with light, but there's a little bit more than light in these examples here. We've got such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney. Now, fire is something that runs through the novella as a symbol of warmth, and there are references to fire in stanza 1, for example, where in stave 1, where we've got the description of the men in the streets gathered around a fire for warmth, and it is very much a symbol of warmth as well for the clerk in stave 1, Bob Cratchit's trying to get warm. He's not given access to the coal, and Scrooge keeps it under lock and key. But here we've got the fire in Scrooge's abode in his dwelling that is, for the first time in decades, is actually being used in a way that it should be. So the Ghost of Christmas Present have brought this mighty blaze. So the obvious symbolism of fire is warmth, but there's also a Christian link as well, and it suggests the strength and power of Christianity. And if you want a very direct, famous link, if you like, God appears as fire to Moses. He appears as a burning bush in the Old Testament when he gives him the Ten Commandments. So that links very strongly with the Christian message as well. That then links on very nicely to the reference to the sparkling eye of the Ghost of Christmas Present and the glowing torch. So we've got both of these symbols of light, which again, like the Ghost of Christmas Past, you can link to the Christian kind of glow coming from them. The same thing is referenced with Fred. His eyes are described as sparkling, and we've also got light that emanates from the calves of Fezziwig. So there are lots of references to light where good people are involved to show that they're good Christian people. Not quite Christianity, but also linked because it's a torch carried by the spirit. It's in the shape of Plenty's horn, and I think that allusion's quite a powerful one because you can link it to the context of the time, which is to do with people not having enough food, because Plenty's horn in Greek and Roman mythology is a symbol of abundance. So there's lots you can say about that there. So I would certainly try to remember some of those details in preparation for the exam. He actually uses the torch as well to bless people, because although it's a torch, water comes from it, and water, when it's used on people, gives them a blessing, and even stops people from arguing with each other. You shed a few drops of water on them, their good humour was restored directly. So it's like a blessing that does help them. You cannot look at the Ghost of Christmas Present without considering ignorance and want. It's such a huge part of the novella, and it's such a powerful symbol. Basically, it's a boy and a girl that appear at the bottom of the robes of the Ghost of Christmas Present, and it's a warning about the effect of keeping the poor in a lack of education and not having enough to eat. Basically saying that if you do this to people, there will be a consequence. So it's a really, really powerful part of the novella. Now, at the start of the Ghost of Christmas Present's journey with Scrooge, he's shown the Cratchits, and he is very moved by what happens with Tiny Tim and what might happen in the future for Tiny Tim. But one of the lessons that the Ghost of Christmas Present wants him to learn is it's not just about one child, it's about all children. So it's not just looking after Tiny Tim and the Cratchits and making sure that good Christian family are okay. It's the poor in general, and this is where the stave comes into its own by the end. So we get reminded of Scrooge's words in the first stave, where when he's asked for money from the charity workers, he says, "Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?" But here, the Ghost of Christmas Present uses that against him, and it's absolutely central to what Dickens is trying to say in this novella. The Cratchits are one family, but they represent hundreds and thousands of families in similar situations. They just happen to be a good Christian family. If you want people to be a part of a society where there is no crime and people are good Christians, you need to treat them in a civilized way. And I think that's what ignorance and want show the reader, and that's really important. Okay, last but not least, the ghost of Christmas yet to come. The ghost of Christmas yet to come. You've got 3 minutes. Let's see what you can come up with. Pause the video. Okay, there are probably fewer quotations that you might pick up on the Ghost of Christmas yet to come, but his impact is absolutely necessary. It's really important in the novella that Scrooge comes to an understanding in stages. If he just saw the Ghost of Christmas yet to come, he might have been terrified and promised to change, but he needed to go through the other changes first, because redemption in Christianity is about actually being sorry for your sins. It's not just about being terrified. But the Ghost of Christmas yet to come is the last piece of the puzzle for Scrooge. So which quotations would you pick here, and what would you say about them? Just pause the video for 5 minutes and have a go. Let's see if you can spot those writers' methods and see what you can say about them. Okay, I think the obvious imagery used in the first collection, in fact probably all of them actually, of quotations is references to language that suggests death. So symbolism very much suggestive of death. So the first one there, it was shrouded in a deep black garment. So shroud is a cloth that used to be used on a dead body, used to be wrapped around a body. But it also, if something's shrouded, it's hidden. And the Ghost of Christmas yet to come is hidden because the future is unknown. But then we've got the references to deep black. So, and obviously the imagery of black is very much to do with death. A phantom is a ghost as well, so there is that aspect of this. But we have the three adverbs there to describe the movement of the phantom, which again reinforce this mystery of him. But one of them is gravely, and gravely obviously suggests death, because there is a meaning of the word grave to mean a place where a dead body is put, but also it means serious as well. And what the phantom represents is something very serious, because it's showing Scrooge his future if he doesn't change. And the final reference there is the spirit seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. And we've also got sibilant alliteration in that, with the S words of spirit, seemed, and scatter, and that creates the kind of that otherworldly kind of hissing effect as well. There is a couple. There are, sorry, a couple of good examples here of emotive language in the impact that the spirit has on Scrooge. So I identify the phrase solemn dread and his legs trembled. So both of them show the emotional impact on Scrooge, which I think is really important. There's another example there again of sibilant alliteration. So Scrooge feared the silent shape so much. So there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Even in the word much, there's a little bit of sibilant alliteration. Again, suggesting a seriousness about what Scrooge is facing. And the last couple of quotations I've selected is also another example of emotive language, but this time it's turned on its head, because the emotive language prior to this was connected with Scrooge, but this time, ironically, it's the spirit that's showing the emotion. So we've got the reference to the hand shaking, the kind hand trembling, and it just seems to be to do with the joy that the spirit feels at Scrooge's redemption. So it's interesting the way Dickens uses language in this, because he talks about the kind hand, meaning the hand of the spirit, yet there's very little before this moment that suggests anything about the spirit that is kind. but he wants us to show how actually ultimately that Scrooge changes because of the things that the spirits have done, including the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, showing him what his future would likely be if he didn't actually change his ways.